Hello everyone, this is Dr. K. Jagannayaki, Professor, MBA Department, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Dundigal. So today I would like to discuss with you all about data processing. So what exactly this data processing? So how it will be done? So that and all I am going to discuss with you. The data after collection has to be processed and analyzed. So technically speaking, processing implies editing, coding, classification and tabulation of collected data so that they are useful to analysis. So the term analysis, it refers to the computation of certain measures along with searching for patterns of relationships that exist among data groups. In the process of analysis, relationships or differences supporting or conflicting with original or new hypotheses should be subjected to statistical tools of significance. So in the processing, we used to analyze and we can able to identify the relationships between the variables, and sometimes we may also evaluate the supporting and offensive type of opinions from the people, and we used to test the new hypotheses that have been formulated to come out with a new process, new products or new services. So to determine with what validity data can be said to indicate any conclusion. So in the processing, we used to discuss about the data collection. After collecting the data, how you are going to edit the data and how you are going to categorize or classify the data, and to find out or to easily identify the data, we used to assign some codes. Like for nominal data, we'll assign some kind of codes. Ordinal data will identify with some other code like that, so that it can be very useful and easy to analyze the data. Then coming to the process of raw data, what we are going to do after collecting the data, as we discussed earlier, the first step is editing, then comes coding, data file, then here we used to have about analysis approach. See, in case of the first three steps, error checking takes place in each of these stages. If any errors will be there, we need to rectify those errors. Then after that, analysis approaches. Which type of analysis we have to do? It depends upon the type of data. Whether would you like to go with descriptive analysis, you are going to describe about certain characteristics of the data, then we have to go with descriptive analysis. Sometimes if you are going to measure only one variable, then we have to go with univariate analysis. If you are going to study the relationship or association between two variables, then you have to use bivariate analysis. If you have more than two variables, then we have to analyze the data using multivariate analysis tools and techniques. So coming to the first process, first step involved in the data processing is editing. So it is a process of examining the collected raw data. So raw data means which do not have a specific meaning. Especially in case of surveys, whatever data we are going to collect, which is not having any meaningful information. So to detect errors and omissions and also to correct these when possible, so that process is known as editing. So it involves a careful scrutiny of the completed questionnaires and or also schedules. Editing is done to assure that the data are accurate, consistent with other facts gathered. So whatever information we are going to collect from the respondent, ensure that the data is accurate, and we have to maintain the consistency and other facts which are used in the later stages that also need to gather and uniformly entered and completed as possible and have been well arranged to facilitate coding and tabulation. Then in case of editing, we'll have field editing. So field editing, it consists of the review of reporting forms by the investigator for completing. So what exactly under field editing he will do? He will translating certain things, and whenever he want to rectify or he want to minimize the errors, if he found anything, he is going to rewrite the same what has written in abbreviated form or in illegible form at the time of recording the respondents' responses. See, as the researcher may not have sufficient time to record all the responses in detail, so sometimes he will go with abbreviations or illegible form. So later he will rewrite the same in elaborative manner. So that type of editing is known as field editing. The next type of editing is central editing. So it should take place when all the forms or schedules have been completed and returned to the office. So this type of editing implies that all forms should get a thorough editing by a single editor in a small study. If the study is like large inquiry, if you are going to consider the complete enumeration, for example like census survey, a team of editors will work on that. They will edit all the schedules. Then the editors must keep in view several points while performing their work. The first one is they should be familiar with instructions given to the interviewers, coders, as well as with the editing instructions. So they need to follow the editing instructions. They should have knowledge about the editing, how to do the editing kind of things. And they must make entries on the form in some distinctive color and that two in a standardized form. So they will have their own formats. In that they have to make entries related to the survey, and they should initial all answers which they change or supply. So as some cases, whenever they are rewriting the responses, and even if they are going to make some kind of errors, they are going to rectify it, that should be mentioned clearly in the central editing. And editor's initials, the date of editing should be placed on each completed form or schedule. So after editing process done, the editor, he need to put his initial. So that is the indication he has checked thoroughly, and date of editing should also be placed on each completed forms. And next step is coding. After editing, the second step is coding. Coding is the process of assigning numerals or other symbols to answers so that responses can be put into a limited number of categories or classes. So such classes should be appropriate to the research problem under consideration. So it is necessary for efficient analysis. See, if you give codes, it will be very easy to the researcher to refer the data just by looking at the codes. So coding decision should be usually taken at the designing stage of the questionnaire. So for example, if in questionnaire, let us take, you are talking about the gender. So you have to include gender is one of the item in your survey. So how can we specify? So in general, we used to talk about male, female and transgender like that, right? So we used to categorize this: one meant for male, two meant for female and three transgender. Even if you are talking about the marital status of a respondent, so there also we can use certain numbers. We can define: one unmarried, two married and three widowed. So, or diversed, we can write diversed. So, like that, we used to give codes to the data, whatever you are going to include in the questionnaire. So, this can be done at the initial stages while designing the questionnaire. Then third step is classification. So a large volume of raw data which must be reduced into homogeneous groups. So after editing, coding, then we used to classify the data into homogeneous groups. So the process of arranging data in groups or classes on the basis of common characteristics. So just by having the common characteristics, we can classify the data in different groups or classes. So classification can be one of the following two types depending upon the nature of the phenomena involved. The classification according to attributes. Attributes means the characteristics. So as we know, the data are classified on the basis of common characteristics which can be either descriptive or numerical. So again we have to make it clear whether the data is qualitative or quantitative. When you are talking about descriptive, like literacy, honesty, even quality, these things comes under descriptive characteristics, where there is certain things we can able to quantify like weight, height, income. So basing on the type of data we use to classify the data, either descriptive or numerical. And such type of classifications can be simple classification or manifold classification. So in case of simple classification, we used to consider only one single attribute and divide the universe or the population into two classes. So one class consisting of items possessing the given attribute and the other class consisting of items which do not possess the given attribute. So if you are talking about skill, so this is only one attribute you want to consider. Then further we can divide the employees or labor into skilled and unskilled. So this type of classification is known as simple classification. Even if you are talking about the shift system, so how many shifts you are going to classify? First, second, third, like that. And second classification is that classification according to class intervals. So whenever we are talking about the class intervals, so which possess numerical characteristics, that means we can able to quantify the data. So it is a quantitative phenomena which can be measured through some statistical units, right? So in case of data relating to income, production, age, height, weight, all these things comes under numerical phenomena or quantitative phenomena. So such data are known as statistics of variables and are classified on the basis of class intervals. For example, you are talking about the student's performance, taking marks of a particular subject. So we used to give some class intervals 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, like that. So that's how we used to categorize or classify the student marks by taking different class intervals. So basing on that, we can able to identify how many students fall under the category from 10 to 20, 20 to 30, like that. We can easily classify the data by using class intervals. Then after classification, the next step is tabulation. So tabulation means arranging the data in the form of tables. So arranging a mass of data has been assembled in some kind of concise and logical order. So if you're arranging the data in the form of tables, we used to consider only numerical figures. So the process of summarizing raw data in compact form in the form of statistical tables for further analysis. So that process is known as tabulation. So tabulation is an orderly arrangement of data in columns and rows. So tabulation is essential because of the following reasons. The first reason is that it conserves space and reduces explanatory and descriptive statements to a minimum. So whenever we are going with tabulation, we can have very less space and we can also simplify the large volume of data in a most condensed and precise form. And only numerical values we are going to consider so that it becomes very easy for algebraic treatment. So it facilitates the process of comparison. So if you are arranging the data in the form of tables, and those tables can also used for comparative analysis, it facilitates the summation of items and detection of errors and omissions. So once if you are arranging the data in the tables, so we can able to have how many items you are going to include in the tables, and we'll have the summative values of all the items, and also sometimes we can able to detect if any errors or any items to be omitted from the data analysis. So it provides a basis for various statistical computations. So these tables only further we are going to use for data analysis by using appropriate statistical tools. So this is the specimen of a table. So it is essential to mention the table number, title, and also if any head note. And the table, as we know, it is an arrangement of rows and columns. The columns are known as stubs and rows are known as captions. Row heading is known as stub and column is known as caption. Each stub further divided into different rows, and columns also, captions are also subdivided into various columns, and we used to have the summative values of total rows as well as for total columns also. And below the table we used to specify the source node and footnote also. So source node means from where you have extracted a particular table. So that source we need to mention. If you want to highlight any kind of items in the footnote, we can mention in the form of footnote. So tabulation may also be classified as simple and complex tabulation. Simple tabulation gives information about one or more groups of independent questions. And complex means it shows the division of data in two or more categories. And this tabulation, it is designed to give information concerning about one or more sets of interrelated questions. So whatever you are going to show in the form of table, whatever items you are taking in the table, they will have some kind of relationship between each other. So simple tabulation generally result in one-way tables which consist of only one characteristic, whereas complex tabulations result in two-way tables, three-way tables, and many-fold tables. So it depends into how many classes you are going to arrange the data. Basing on that, we'll classify the tables as simple, two-way, three-way, or many-fold tables. Two-way tables or three-way tables or many-fold tables are all examples of cross-tabulation. Then, even for tables also, we need to have some kind of principles which are known as generally accepted principles of tabulation. So while arranging the data in tables, we need to follow these guidelines. Every table should have a clear, concise and adequate title. So we need to specify a title to the table so that we can easily identify the table along with their names. Every table should be given a distinct number to facilitate easy reference. So if you have 3 or 4 tables just specify what is table 1, number 1, so and so table, 2, 3, like that. For every table, we have to specify a distinct number so that we can easily identify and it facilitates easy reference to the people. And the column headings, which are known as captions, and the row headings are known as tabs of the table, should be clear and brief. So what you are going to include in the columns and the headings of the rows, that should be specified clearly. The units of measurement under each heading or subheading must always be indicated. So whether units means, like if you are going to talk about the sales can be represented in terms of rupees. If you are talking about production, so it can be mentioned in 1000 units, like that. If you are talking about the weight, we used to measure in terms of kgs, like that. We have to specify the units of measurement under each heading or subheading must always be indicated. The next one is explanatory footnote, if any. If you want to explain anything about a particular thing, so in the table we have to mention like a star mark. So what is that asterisk represents? So that should be specified below the table in the footnote. Then source or sources from where the data have been obtained must be indicated just below the table. So under source note, for example, if you have extracted the table from any book, just mention the book name under source note. Usually the columns are separated from one another by lines which make the table more readable and attractive. So just by using the lines to separate the column from one column to another, so it can be easy to read and it makes the table very attractive. And there should be thick lines to separate the data under one class from the data under another class, and the lines separating subdivisions of the classes should be comparatively thin lines. So like how we have to construct the table, and the columns may be numbered to facilitate reference. For example, if you have 4 or 5 columns, so each column you assign number, first column serial number, second name of the student, third hall ticket number, like that. We have to specify column numbers, and those columns whose data are to be compared should be kept side by side. So if you are going to compare two data sets, so they can be placed side by side so that we can easily compare the data. Similarly, the percentages or averages, they must also be kept close to the data. And it is generally considered better to approximate figures before tabulation, as the same would reduce unnecessary details in the table itself. So we should not write anything in descriptive manner, only the figures should be mentioned in the tabulation. And in order to emphasize the relative significance of certain characteristics, different kinds of type, spacing, indentations may be used. So proper shaping, space should be provided even so that it looks very attractive. So we should not ignore these guidelines whenever we are going to construct any table. It is important that all column figures be properly aligned. Decimal points and plus or minus sign should be in perfect alignment. So basically we need to check the alignment of all the rows and columns, so it will be very easy to the people. Then coming to abbreviations. Abbreviation should be avoided and ditto mark should not be used in the table. So some people, they will write abbreviations instead of the full length this thing. So statement they are not going to elaborate, just they will mention HTN. So what is this HTN? People they don't know. So for that reason we have to write completely hall ticket number like that. So that kind of abbreviations or short forms may not be used in the tables, and we should not use ditto marks in the table. And miscellaneous and exceptional items, if any, should be usually placed in the last row of the table. So especially in case of accounts kind of thing, there will be some expenditure which may not have any clarity. So they used to specify as miscellaneous. So that should be placed in the last row of the table. And table should be made as logical, clear, accurate and simple as possible. And total rows should normally be placed in the extreme right column, and that of column should be placed at the bottom. And the arrangement of categories in a table may be chronological, geographical, alphabetical or according to magnitude to facilitate comparison. So you can arrange the data, either you can follow chronological order, or some people will prefer basing on the geographical reason they used to arrange the data in the tables, and some people prefer alphabetical. It depends on the individual researcher how they are going to align the data in the tables. So above all, the table must suit the needs and requirement of an investigation. So finally we should check whether it fulfills the requirement of the investigator or not. So what kind of problems generally we'll face during the processing data? The following two problems of processing the data considered for analytical purpose. The first problem is that don't know responses. So while processing the data, the researcher often comes across some responses that are difficult to handle. One category of such responses may be don't know response, or simply we'll say DK response. When the DK response group is small, it is of little significance. But if the DK responses group is relatively big, it becomes a matter of major concern, in which the case the question arises, is the question which elicited DK response useless? So if it is small, okay, it do not have any significance, it do not have any kind of adverse impact on the study. But if you find more number of DK responses, then we have to analyze ourselves, is the question which elicited DK response useless? Maybe the question wrong, or the way of formulating the question may be not correct. The answer depends on 2 points. The respondent actually may not know the answer, or the researcher may fail in obtaining appropriate information. So out of these two cases, we'll have more number of DK responses. And whenever we are using percentages or some numbers, percentages are often used in data presentation, for they simplify numbers, reducing all of them to a 0 to 100 range. Through the use of percentages, the data are reduced in the standard form with base equal to 100, which fact facilitate relative comparisons. So whenever you want to compare the data, it is better to go with percentages or ratios. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.